I am Charles Twardy. I am at KeyW, a small company that you haven't heard of in the DC area. We've recently been bought by Jacobs, a very large company you probably haven't heard from that is worldwide. I also am an affiliate faculty at George Mason University. Replication Markets is a 18-month project for forecasting the outcome of social and behavioral science replication experiments. As we'll see in a few slides, sponsored by DARPA, and we're partnered with Harvard, Massey, Stockholm, and George Mason universities, and our awesome software architect at Goldbrand. This is our webpage, Reliable Research Replicates. That's a verb, not a noun. This isn't a Blade Runner takeoff where we are reliable research replicates. And it's not just a tagline, we're running prediction markets. You can, and we encourage you to join and forecast what the outcomes of these 3,000 replications are going to be. Let's see how that works. Every 4 weeks, we're going to put up 300 claims that come from studies selected by the Center for Open Science down in Charlottesville. They do the hard work of selecting the studies, curating them, and extracting a main claim. Not necessarily the main claim, as they will tell you in discussions that they've had with the authors, but a main claim. And we wrap it up, say, okay, if a high-quality replication were to be performed on this study, would you get the same result? We do both surveys and markets. In the survey, in the market, you get to move the slider, just like in the survey, but there's a slight twist. And we're offering cash prizes. This prediction markets tend to work better if you actually offer cash prizes. We're also offering in the short term prizes for how well we think you've done in the survey, even though ground truth won't be available for several months. Our Harvard team is testing a forecasting algorithm that attempts to extract correct answers in the absence of ground truth. So that could blow up spectacularly, and we're excited to see what happens. A small portion of our funding is reserved for those prizes. In this audience, you probably don't need this slide. There's a lot of ways that doing replications help science, and forecasting them helps us get a sense of how much information is actually out there that has not been taken into account when studies are published, when people use studies for policy analysis, or when someone else is going to do a new paper or try to replicate a study that's out there in the field. The larger project we're embedded in is DARPA SCORE. They're ultimately aiming for a black box where you drop in the PDF of the paper and out comes a quality score which is related to its replicability. Everybody should play. Okay. Who are we? Just very briefly, the experiment design and the incentives team. If you're familiar with previous prediction markets on replication, this is those folks. Thomas Pfeiffer at Massey University, Anna Draber and Magnus Johansson at Stockholm, Yiling Chen and her colleagues at Harvard University. Postdocs and graduate students who do a lot of the work. I come from the George Mason team. We built the SciCast prediction market that we're using for the engine on this one. And we have built out a fantastic participant engagement team and integration. Thanks, of course, to our amazing sponsor. DARPA is an unlikely candidate for sponsoring replication work in the social and behavioral sciences, but if you were at MetaScience, you got to hear our program manager's awesome presentation for why DARPA is interested, why he, as an anthropologist, got into DARPA and is trying to use their influence to advance the state of the art in social science, particularly helping the results to be more reliable, or, if exploratory and less reliable, at least obviously rated as such. Thanks again to BITS for inviting us to be out here, even though we're not officially part of that group, but we're trying to work in parallel with a lot of the cool things they are doing. You may or may not have heard of SCORE written up. Wired has a couple of articles. One, which our program manager hates, and so I haven't put on the slide, is DARPA's building a BS detector for science. I think the conversation in that interview went, just don't call it a BS detector. And so, of course, whoever writes the headlines did that. This article here wants to solve science's reproducibility crisis was, again, before the forecasting started, but a little farther along, does a nice summary. One part is the crowd forecasts. Okay, we are one of two teams doing forecasting. So if you search on the web, you can find our competitors at the University of Melbourne. I, of course, would prefer that you join our project, but they do fantastic work as well. The basic thing is we do all online, and our primary method is markets, so it's a little less socially interactive. Their primary method is the IDEA protocol, which is based on face-to-face Delphi process. They also have some online where they try to scale that up. We, of course, rely on the Center for Open Science for doing the replications themselves. So each round, how are we going to do this? 10 rounds of 300 claims. In each round, 4 weeks, September to May. We are just starting round 1 right now. We're in the survey phase. Week 1 is surveys. Everyone gets a batch of 10 claims, and we encourage you to do more batches. Prizes for the top 4 people in each batch. We use the Harvard's algorithm for scoring surveys. It's basically a wisdom of the crowd, peer prediction, kind of statistical black magic that in historical tests does very well. We're waiting to see how it does here. And then weeks 2 to 3, we run a market where you get to see all 300 claims. We set the initial prices according to the p-values of the original study, because in the 4 previous replication studies that the Center for Open Science has done, p-value is actually a pretty good predictor for whether it will replicate. It's a simple 2-stage decision tree. If the p-value was published as just less than 0.05, it replicates about 30% of the time. If it was less than 0.01, about 40% of the time. These numbers are lower than you would think. And if it's less than 0.001, about 80% of the time. Yeah, that's a satisfying result, though clearly not 0.001. And then we give everyone a rest, including us, and do it again. How much time do I have?
About 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. I think I won't need all of that. What does it look like? And we're in the middle of the survey week for round 1 right now. And so you can't join the surveys, but you can still join the markets if you wanted. Surveys, you go to our main platform and it gives you a surveys tab. You click out here and we just use Qualtrics for the surveys. They're very straightforward. You get a description of the study, what fields, a link to the study itself, the main hypothesis, and several claims of progressively fine detail ending with what were the actual statistics. Extract the key statistics, and then we ask you some questions. Caveat, all of this was machine extracted by the Center for Open Science with a little bit of editorial overview, but they have the excruciating job of getting 3,000 of these things. So there's always some machine extraction noise. We ask you 7 questions, like, what's the probability a high-power, direct replication would find a statistically significant effect in the same direction? A little bit of explanation, you get to move the slider. A surprisingly popular question, right? The surprisingly popular algorithm previously known as Bayesian truth theorem. What fraction of participants will give an estimate larger than 50% on the previous question? The intuition here is that if you're good at forecasting what other people are going to say, you may have more information about what's going on. We should weight you higher. One of the statistical black magic things that goes into the Harvard algorithm. We ask you the same thing again about what if it were a data analytic replication, where we don't redo the experiment, we find a similar data set. This happens more often in economics research, not lab economics, but macroeconomics, where you might have an analysis of GDP and you rerun it on some other country's GDP or the same country 5 years later. Weeks 2 to 3, in the market. So there's 300 claims, so to keep you from having to scroll through all of them, if you just want to pick out experimental economics, you can do that. If you want to look just at the Journal of Consumer Research, you can do that. We've got some leaderboards, so you can see how you stand in expectation, because remember, we won't know the results until next May, roughly May, depending on when the Center for Open Science gets all their results in. By the way, how many results? We expect about 100. They simply do not have the resources to do 3,000 replications in the course of a year, so they're picking 100 randomly. We don't know which of these 3,000 they're going to pick. Although in the survey, we ask you if you can guess which are more likely and less likely. The hope from the Center for Open Science is there will be no signal in that. If there is, we need to reevaluate, some of our analysis procedures, and certainly some of our aggregation. All right, other ways of choosing featured claims. You can see who has said what or made forecasts where. You get to the market, same text, slightly different formatted. This is all the information extracted from the original claim. Hey, it's another slider, but now you're in a market. What's the difference between a market and a survey? You have finite points. The more you move a slider from what the market currently forecasts, the more points you have to invest to do it. But if you're right, you will earn more points later on, and that would translate into larger prizes as well as more influence in the market. Off on the right, it tells you how many points will it cost you to do this, and how many shares of yes are you buying. Quick results. We've had a meta market so far. Everything in this field gets very meta. And so before we started forecasting any of these claims, we said, well, stop. Before you see any claims, what do you think our average replication rates are going to be? For economics, which our forecasters liked, at the time I took the screenshot, it was 63%. You can see it wobbled up and down market-like, but it was, roughly in the 60-ish area, compared to psychology, which was more in the 40-ish area. We let our forecasters make comments. I like this one. I think replication rates are not much higher than in other fields because of publication bias. This one, publication bias and other incentives. This person, incentives are powerful in economics, so replication rates are probably higher. Same ostensible reason, pushing them to different conclusions. So you get some really rich data that we're looking forward to analyzing. Overall, just to give you a preview of what's happened here, they think we're going to be right around 50% overall, in line with previous studies, and they think it's going to vary by field, with economics on top and marketing management and other areas at the bottom. I'm not sure I would have forecast in quite the same direction, so it'll be interesting to see how we do. Happily, for everyone in this crowd, people are optimistic. They think if we go by year, then the average replicability is going to be increasing from the earliest in our study, 2009, to the latest, 2018, by about 10 percentage points. Hopefully, they're right about that, and the trend continues. We had 218 people trading in the market in round 0 for 1,700 trades. We have 700 people who were eligible for the surveys. We don't yet know how many are going to finish by the end of the weekend. But the markets open on Monday and will remain open for 2 weeks. So be happy if people followed the project, just tweet it at us, or most especially forecast. I've put some cards out there that you can just scan on the phone to get to our website, find out more about us, or register, and I'd be happy for questions.